Welcome, community, and thank you for joining me for another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Consultant, helping members of the C-Suite and their teams reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. I am so excited to have with me Ms. Jill Angel, the Chief People Officer at TrueCar. And today we're going to be recognizing and honoring Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and just having a little conversation about TrueCar and Jill's passion as a Chief People Officer. Jill, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me.
My goodness, Dr. Anita, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I just want to congratulate you on all of your success, being an entrepreneur, 100% women-owned, women of color-owned business. I mean, it looks fabulous, and your new website is amazing. So
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I put a lot of heart and soul into that website. My copywriter, her name is Jill Sunga. She has been amazing. And my web designer, Christine Leon, she's been amazing as well. I've had an incredible team of all women entrepreneurs, and it's just been a delight. So thank you so much for checking it out and for noticing. I appreciate that. And I will pass on those words of encouragement. Thank you.
Absolutely. I make kudos to the team because it's incredible. And it's just something to be proud of.
And it is. They did a great job.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you are so sweet because when we first met, oh gosh, about three weeks ago by now, at the dinner that Stanton Chase and Marsh hosted for us, you were just so sweet. You came up to me and said, "I'm so excited to meet you. I'm so glad to be here." I need to know, Jill, how did you even hear about me? Tell the community.
I heard about you from no other than the Heidi Pancake.
Yes, Heidi Pancake.
And I'm just going to shout out to Heidi because, you know, she spoke really highly of you, which prompted me. She told me about the event, and so it did prompt me to go to your website and learn about you. And so hence why I thought, well, gosh, you know, if I get an opportunity to meet you, that would be wonderful, and have a chit chat with you. And then to think that I was going to be at your table, that was, you know, it was right? surprise and delight.
Well, I'm so glad that you were there. I'm so glad that we talked. And because of the real authentic conversation that we had just in, you know, the 10 or 15 minutes that we had a chance to actually connect between the beginning of the event and the end, that sparked me to invite you to be on the show because the conversation that we had was amazing. We will get into that probably in our second conversation. Right now, I want you to tell us about TrueCar and the culture that you're cultivating there as the Chief People Officer.
Yeah, well, it's really, I mean, it's been a journey. I've been there now a year, actually, this week. And it's really about building an inclusive environment. We're at the beginning of our journey. So we have, and we're at the very beginning, and we're okay saying that because we know we have a lot to learn and a lot to educate our employees on. And I think what's really great about what we're doing is that our employees, I know they want us to move faster because they always do, but we're trying to be really thoughtful in our approach. And I think the biggest plus for us is that we want our employees to get involved because I have one head of DEI, which she's great, Tiffany Hamilton. But, you know, there's only a people team, and it's really not about HR and a people team. It's really about our employees. And so, you know, we're about to launch our DEI council. And so we have quite a bit of people, about over 20 people that signed up. And I think it's great because it's a great way to get started is to get people involved.
I love the fact that you mentioned that people are excited, but you're also balancing that with let's take measured steps to make sure that we can start and sustain the efforts. Let's talk about that because sometimes there's a misperception that management isn't moving fast enough. And while we definitely want to make sure that we are showing progress, we also want to do it in a way that's going to be sustainable so that we don't flame out. How have you gotten people to understand that?
So number one is we're just getting started, but actually starting with hiring. And what I mean by hiring is spending time with our leaders and our hiring managers and showing them where they are today. Like, what does our data look like? And now we've only met with 2 teams, but in both cases, they were actually surprised. Some surprised where they thought, wow, our DEI metrics look better than we thought, or they were, you know, wow, okay, we've got to work to cut out for us. But I think it was helpful in that there is, for them for our teams to understand that, listen, this is again a journey. It's going to take some time, but it starts here and now by looking at the data and then talking about where do you want to be? What should your teams look like? And how do you think having a diverse workforce will impact your your org, or, your teams, and also our consumers? And having that conversation, an open conversation, and trying to, it's only been one conversation each, but I think over time, because we're going to have follow-up conversations, that they will see that it's okay to not know, what it means to have a diverse workforce other than the obvious, right? It also means about how do you retain a diverse workforce? What does it mean for your business and your goals? Like, how could it be better? And I think because we're starting to have those meetings, now when they go back and they say, oh, we have an open rec we want to go hire for, they're thinking about it again, right? Because part of our conversations is about, okay, so you want a diverse workforce. Where do you think it's going to be the best places to look for these diverse candidates? Because it's really important that we go and we meet where the candidates are. And, really having the hiring managers to take a step back and really think about it. Like, if you think it's just going to happen, it's not. Right? You really need to be focused. And I think it was a really good first meeting, one, to show them what does the data look like for their team, to help them with what do they want to look like, right? What are the goals, and then how to get there. And then keep following up in a consistent, measured way to make sure that we're still on target. Now, maybe it's me, and I just see things through rose glass. I truly believe that day has changed the way they're thinking about when they're hiring, right? Because you can't just, if you're really serious about having a diverse workforce, which I know every one of our leaders are, then that means it means work and it means focus.
I took a couple notes here. You mentioned the fact that you can't just think about it. You've got to do something different. For example, if you've always recruited from the same pool and you always get the same kind of candidates, it's not fair to say we can't find them. You need to consider a different pool to fish from. So that's one thing that came to mind when you said you can't just think about it. But when you mentioned the fact that some of the data was a pleasant surprise and some of the data was a clear opportunity to do something different, what was something that's pleasantly surprised you, and what was something that indicated the need to do something different?
I think when it came to, well, the one area that we know we need to work on is our women, our females versus males, right? And I think that was a surprise. It's like, I don't know if it was so much a surprise, but it was just reality. At TrueCar, 60% of our workforce is male, and then 40% female. And it's actually less when it comes, if you start looking at leadership. So, we're really open about it. We haven't put our goals out there on our internet, but that's, we are working towards that for 2024. But we're okay with just being really candid about where we sit. So I think that's where I think everyone started getting uncomfortable with, because they know that everyone says it, DEI means something and it's important. But I think everyone feels a little bit guilty because either, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but it's just, okay, so this is where we are and now we really need to get to work. One of the challenges that we have is that we're not hiring a lot. So far, we haven't been hiring a lot, but we have at least 10 positions open. So there's still opportunity. And even if it's just building the pipeline, we're still being focused on our pipeline, and there's still things that we can do as leaders.
And building the pipeline is huge. When you talk about the data, I'm curious, what was your data source? Because I've got a couple of clients who specifically use Great Place to Work to say, we're not just going to go for the designation, but we're also going to see what that Great Place to Work data tells us. What was your source to determine what we're going to do, how we're doing, and what the gap is?
We use that source too, but right now, I think it's been a myriad of different inputs from different colleagues that were aggregating our data. And some of it is out there. It's hard to find data out there, but we've been looking at our census data. But I don't know if we have one source that we feel really strongly about. I think it's just, for us, is coming up with our own internal goals to start with. And and then we could start benchmarking. I mean, if you know a better source, please let us know, because I just haven't found a or even a couple sources that I felt like, wow, this is really good data.
And that's fair. And to be honest, some of this data can be difficult to track. It can be difficult to find the right tool for your culture. So kudos for looking. I do recommend Great Place to Work. I've heard great things about them. And as a matter of fact, one of the senior leaders from Great Place to Work is going to be a guest in a future show. So I'm very much looking forward to having him on.
Oh,
Right
that's
now,
great.
though, I want to turn the page and I want you to share with the community how your passion for belonging in the workplace was ignited years ago through your experiences growing up as an Asian American little girl.
Yes. I remember vividly being in elementary school, and I went to a primarily white school, and I found myself, and there were Asians, but not that many. And I always looked around thinking, wow, my lunch looks different than everybody else. I know that is, what you hear often, but it was the truth. And I just kind of ignored it. And I tried to acclimate as much as I can with, my friends at the time, play down my food because they would mention, oh, wow, what are you eating? And I would just turn around to say, I don't know. I don't really like it anyways. What are you having? And I would turn the question more towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I really learned that I was, different. I never really let it bother me because, it just was very small, minimal to me. But it's just when I started to realize that I was different and I felt different. And then as I got older, um, I started to realize in high school that that the Asians in the high school tend to group together and then everybody else. And I felt like, okay, where do I fit? Because I never associated myself with just purely Asian
Mm-hmm.
or purely white. I always felt in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not something that you go home and talk to your parents about. At least I didn't feel like it, because in my household, it was more about just do well at school, work hard, get a great job, and you'll be fine. And we really never talked about in my household, we never really talked about feelings. And I don't even know if I knew enough to articulate how I was feeling. I just kept on moving forward. But I did know that I was um, slightly different than most.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me is where I saw, some of as I fast forward and I go into a business, and I started out in operation, not in HR, I started to look around and notice that the Asian American, at least in my experience, that there weren't as many leaders that I saw, but they were still doing well and successful. And it wasn't necessarily just Asian Americans; it was any employee that just didn't have a strong voice, or you could tell that just wasn't confident yet. And so for me, my journey was having the opportunity to become more of that head of people. And there was a lot in between that. So just wasn't decided to jump over, by the way.
Right,
But
right.
it was an opportunity because I saw people for what they could be. They just needed a little help
Mm-hmm.
and support. Is why I felt so passionate about being head of, being in the HR department, because I felt like if you can see people, help them grow and to
Mm-hmm.
find their voice, there's great opportunity for each individual.
Yeah. We have kind of a similar experience in high school. What I heard, though, without you saying it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when it came to the lunch, and I almost felt like that is the beginnings of experiencing what it means to have to assimilate, right? To feel
Yes.
like you belong somewhere. And the fact that you weren't exclusively with the Asian community in high school, but not exclusively with the white community in high school. I went through the same thing. My mother being English teacher, I mean, everything had to be, grammatically correct. And I'm writing English papers during the summertime. I'm like, really? And in high school, I never felt like I belonged. And so often I was referred to as an Oreo. I was white on the outside, or black on the outside, but white on the inside. And it was hurtful because you never know where you belong. But at the same time,
Yes.
it kind of prepared me to be able to know how to switch in corporate America.
I can relate. And I wonder too often, because I don't remember being so bothered by it, but as I get older and I see it happening around me,
Mm-hmm.
is when I get really sad,
Yeah.
and you just want to go and support and help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
When you talk about leadership in the higher levels, and sometimes it has nothing to do with race, but just amplifying the voices of those who might be invisible or just not heard, where does sometimes this myth about the model minority come in particular for Asian Americans that are going up the executive chain?
Well, I think it's a I feel like there's a stereotype, and I this
Mhm.
is just speaking for myself and my experience, is that if you are there's this perception that if you're Asian American, right, um, that you're going to be successful. Or,
Mhm.
you feel like you're going to be successful. You have to be successful, and that you're going to be very good at what you do, just in general, about no matter what it is. And I think there's this pressure for you know, continuing to moving up in the ladder. But the question is how do you really get to that C-suite, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
How do you, if you don't have someone encouraging you to take a seat when that hasn't been part of the conversation that you're used to having, let's say at home? I mean, I don't recall in any of my family gatherings of anybody saying to my cousins or myself, "But what do you want to be? Do you want to be at that C-suite level or be that top executive?" No, they tell you, "Hey, do well at school, and you'll get a great job, and
Mhm.
everything will be just fine." And I think it's really different. It's how do you have that voice, get your opinion heard, make sure that the employees around you are heard, and
Mhm.
being that leader and having that courage.
You mentioned the pressure of people assuming that you're just going to be good at everything you do. That's one type of pressure. The other type of pressure is for other minorities being assuming that you're not going to be that good. And so you're knocking yourself out to prove that you are. Do you see that difference?
Do I see that difference? Yeah, I do. I do. I try hard to help when I see it happening. I try to just, help mentor and coach
Yeah.
um, employees to let them know I see you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we do like a meet and greet. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's fun to do that, but I think really helping them find their voice and understand, like, where do they want to be when they grow up, and
Mm-hmm.
how should they get there, and is there anything that I can help you with, or can another leader help you?
Yeah.
And and then having that conversation with other leaders to help that individual be visible, be seen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What you just said kind of reminds me of a conversation that I had recently with a colleague of mine, and we were recounting the importance of mentors and different mentors that we've had in our lives. And I was telling him about one mentor in particular. She was the advisor to the women's committee where I was serving as vice president. And one of the things I really appreciated about her was whenever the council brought an idea to her, she never said no. She would always say, I need you to bring me X, Y, and Z so that I can say yes. And there's a huge difference between saying no and saying, these are the things that I need that will get me to yes. And so when you mention taking someone and giving them a voice and helping make them visible, I think of that, giving them the tools and the exposure to make them visible instead of saying, well, you're not visible enough.
I feel very fortunate because I have given opportunity to take on more.
Mhm.
And because of that, I feel like been given these tools that I could put in my toolbox and pull out when I need them, which I
Mhm.
find so helpful. And I believe that that's what gives me the confidence that I have today. So,
Mhm.
as much as possible, I try to do that for others. And, what makes me so happy is when I see other leaders doing the same.
Yeah.
We have a lot of great leaders at TrueCar, and I'm so honored to work next to them. And um, the when I say we have so many strong leaders, is because I see some of our leaders pushing our employees to take on more and to grow. And I think that's so important.
Well, that is definitely a great place to have our next conversation, because we're going to be digging into a little bit more about the conversation that you and I had that night at the Stanton Chase dinner about an interaction that you had with one of your staff members. So I'm really looking forward to that. Community, you want to definitely come back for my next conversation with Jill Angel, the Chief People Officer at TrueCar. I want to thank you for joining this conversation, this real conversation from the C-suite. And to learn more about my services and resources, please go to my website, my newly redesigned website at drnita.com. Remember, you do need to spell out the word doctor. While you're there, click the media link at the top of the landing page to hear this show again or any past broadcast. And you can also find me on your favorite podcast players. So please get in the flow, follow, like, and overshare with your network any conversation that helps you reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.